Are we good to go? Okay. So, as I said, I want to kind of set the stage of where we're at. We know that this last year has been extremely difficult. All of the trauma and uncertainty has certainly taken a toll. Several surveys indicate now that employees have had the taste of teleworking, working from home, hybrid models. A SHRM study shows that over half of workers said they would choose to never return to their work site if they could continue to work permanently from home. New York Times has 55% of people said at least they'd like to work from home 3 days a week. And a Spring Health survey showed that 3/4 of employees who responded said they are experiencing burnout. Achievers Workforce Institute survey unfortunately shows that as many as half of workers intend to look for a new job in 2021 for reasons such as disengagement and burnout, but better compensation and benefits and better work-life balance are the top 2 reasons why employees say that they would leave. Unfortunately, a lot of the respondents just feel less connected to their organization since the pandemic, and feel as though the company culture has diminished. It has been very challenging to maintain a culture when people are dispersed and stressed out and undergoing the trauma that they had to go through this year. Unfortunately, just 21% of the folks who participated in this survey said they are very engaged at work. That means we got about 80% who are not that into it. They're burnout, they're tired, or just don't feel as though they're that into the organization anymore. So during the pandemic, we may have lost some focus on work-life balance. We thought folks working from home might achieve more of that. Unfortunately, we know that people may have worked many more hours than they did when they were coming into the office. If we had employees' feedback, we may not have been able to enact change, follow up on it, and things like recognition and so forth have fallen by the wayside. So it's important now that we're really intentional about addressing these areas if we're going to increase engagement and hopefully reduce turnover. The headlines are not good. Turnover tsunami expected once the pandemic ends. That study said over half of employees may be looking for other jobs. The next pandemic is mental health. A lot of people have paid the price with their mental health. And unfortunately, when people are burnt out, tired, have been stressed out, unfortunately, these things can also spur increased litigation, which the next slide shows. This law firm has had a significant increase in the types of suits that have been filed. The number one complaint has been over remote work and leave conflicts. The second tied is retaliation or whistleblower complaints and good old employment discrimination claims. Only 7% of these claims have been wage and hour disputes, but today I'm going to spend a little bit of time on that because in my experiences, nonprofits, small businesses, sometimes this can be an area of challenge for y'all. So here's the agenda. The boring stuff. We've got to cover some HR compliance matters, starting with Fair Labor Standards Act. I'm going to briefly talk about some changes in sex discrimination protection, very quickly about American Rescue Plan Act, and then I want to make sure you're aware of some trends coming up, and then we're going to get into the discussion. So first, we're going to start with the poll. Make sure you're all still with me. You haven't gone away for get your coffee or whatnot. So Blake, if you could help us out with the poll. All right. Looks, oh, still going. Okay, so we've got about 60% who are doing the hybrid in-office or remote, and about 40% in office. All right, thanks. Yay, thank you for participating. And we're going to talk about where you're at and where you're going with these models once we get into the discussion. Okay, Blake, how do we remove that now? I'm moving on. There we go. Okay, so I wanted to give you a little heads up before I get into this, my presentation about compliance. And these are the questions that we're going to be discussing. And I'm not sure how many we're going to have on the call by the time we get to them, but I wanted to give you a heads up on what they are so you can pick one or two of them to share what actions you're taking, what practices you've put into place. So the first one we're going to talk about when we get to that is just how you expect your work environment to continue to evolve regarding, you know, hybrid work, how you're handling vaccinations, things like that. Second question is going to be, what steps have you taken or do you plan to take to keep your employees engaged and to retain them? And our third question is, what support are you offering, if any, to address mental health concerns and burnout? And lastly, but not, and very importantly, what efforts are you taking to improve diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? So I hope you all will pick one or two of those questions to share what practices you're observing and what's working for you. So let's talk about Fair Labor Standards Act. As I mentioned, unfortunately, this is an act that's been around for a really long time, since 1938, but a lot of small organizations just are not familiar with it, and people in large organizations get confused about this exempt, non-exempt thing. So we're going to spend just a few minutes talking about that, and the rest of the compliance matters I'm going to just do a lightning round to cover really high levels so you know you're familiar with the terms, and then you can reach out to me afterwards if we need to get into more of a discussion. But FLSA was enacted in 1938 to protect workers and children. It established the standards of compensation, including what minimum wage must be paid, how overtime must be paid, record keeping, etc. Some states do have separate laws. Kansas and Missouri do not, however. Since 1938, the only two amendments that have occurred were in 2010 and in 2020. And in 2010, this is kind of a little known amendment, and that is that the Affordable Care Act amended a portion of FLSA. It's called the Nursing Mothers Provision, and it requires employers of all sizes to require reasonable break time and a place for nursing mothers. So in case you didn't know that, now you do. Effective January 1st, in addition to the duties test, which we'll talk about here in a second, in order for jobs to be considered exempt or salaried, the incumbents must be paid at least a weekly salary of $684 per week, or $35,568 per year. This is the new salary threshold that we've been hearing about for many years. 3 or 4 years, it was going to be set at 46,000 something. So at least we came down a bit, but that has been a long awaited increase in the salary basis of this test. So really quickly, job classifications. Exempt is commonly referred to as salaried, and that means they're exempt from the majority of wage and hour laws, including overtime. You do not pay salaried people overtime. Non-exempt folks, we usually refer to them as hourly, and they must be paid for all of their hours worked plus overtime if they work more than 40 hours a week. The most common violations of FLSA are misclassifying jobs as exempt when they should be non-exempt. The second one is not paying your hourly employees for all of the compensable hours. So not paying them for all of their hours that are considered hours worked. Another violation is not including all compensation in overtime rates. So if someone has bonuses, things like that, that must be included in that overtime rate calculation. And the last one is unfortunately pretty prevalent, and that's misclassifying employees as independent contractors. And all of these can be have pretty serious consequences. For example, if jobs are misclassified as non-exempt when they should be exempt, hourly instead, they should be classified as hourly, or hourly employees weren't paid for all the hours worked or for their compensable time, employers owe back wages and overtime for 2 years. And if it's a known violation, management did it willingly or knowingly, you must go back for 3 years. So you've got obviously a hit to your expenses, but the worst part of this is the toll that it takes on the employees. We're here to talk about inspiring and engaging employees. These are some of the basic things. We got to make sure we're paying employees correctly. And if they're truly employees, pay them as employees. The exempt classification, really briefly, this is not something that you and I can just decide. It would be easier to classify somebody as salaried. And these employees must be paid on a salary basis. That means the same salary every pay period, give or take a few pennies. And importantly, the job duties must meet the Department of Labor's standards for one of the exemption categories. And the duties tests are listed down there below. Don't have time to get into that, but the duties must fall within one of those categories, and the employee must make at least $35,568 per year for you to classify a job as exempt or salaried. If they don't meet that criteria, it's not a choice. You must classify those jobs as non-exempt. And another point is that the FLSA refers to white-collar workers, and white-collar employees are the only ones that can be considered salaried. It does not apply to blue-collar workers. So if you have or are aware of people who may be doing maintenance-type facilities jobs, those positions very well may not fall under this, fall under the white-collar exemptions. Hourly employees, this is really, really important. They have to be paid, as you know, at least the minimum wages, but for all hours that are suffered or permitted to work. And this is whether you requested them to work the hours or not. If they work them, you must pay them. A lot of policies say to work overtime, you have to get management approval. Even if employees don't, you still must pay them a time and a half for their hours worked over 40 in a work week. Real rests and meal periods are another area where that may be confusing. If your employees take a rest period of 20 minutes or less, that's compensable time. It must be counted as hours worked. A bona fide meal period is usually 30 minutes or more, and you would not have to pay employees if it's a 30-minute or more break. Commonly, employees eat at their desk, continue to work. If they do, even if they're eating their sandwich, it needs to be considered compensable time or time worked. Independent contractors, as I said, this is one of the common violations where employers misclassify employees as contractors when they really should be employees, and you should be taking and paying taxes on their behalf. We were hoping for a new proposed rule that would simplify and clarify the definition of an independent contractor, but that was finally withdrawn in May. And so for now, we still have to follow the IRS 20-factor test. And it boils down to there are truly 20 factors, but in determining whether the person providing service really is an employee or contractor, you have to take all the information together that provides evidence of the degree of control and independence. Those all must be considered. And I have another slide here that provides more detail. I'm not going to go into this because we could spend a lot of time, but that's there for your reference. So bottom line, your actions is make sure your jobs are properly classified and your staff are properly classified. Your definition should be included in your handbook so it's clear to everyone. And for your hourly folks, make sure your timekeeping procedures are clear, especially if you have employees working, hourly workers working remotely. And that's also a common misconception. Employers think, I can't have my hourly people working from home. You can. You just need to make sure you're very clear on what they need to count as hours worked. And when in doubt, your best bet is to classify jobs as hourly if it's borderline. And when in doubt, it's best to classify an individual as an employee and not as a contractor to avoid any legal ramifications. If you have questions, you can contact me. I'm happy to help you navigate any of those issues that you might be having. Okay, moving
Sonja,
on. Yeah,
I
go
think
ahead.
David had a question. Do you want to ask it? He's raised his hand.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Just real quick, Sonja, if you have an executive who is exempt, but is only working like 20 or 30 hours a week, does that salary still apply to them?
Yes.
Regardless of how many hours they're actually working?
Yes.
Okay, I thought so, but I wanted to ask because I'm just a part-time guy.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
You bet, you bet. All right, thanks for raising your hand, appreciate it. Okay, moving along to sex discrimination. There was a lot going on in 2020, and you may have missed the fact that the Supreme Court held that the Title VII of Civil Rights Act of 1964 that does prohibit businesses and organizations with 15 or more employees from discriminating against workers based on protected characteristics. The Supreme Court ruled that sex discrimination under Title VII does include sexual orientation and gender identity. So also if you are a KCMO, your office is in Kansas City, Missouri. There is an ordinance also that includes protection for these two categories as well, sexual orientation and gender identity. So if either of these situations apply to you, you've got 15 or more employees, or you're in KCMO, you may want to consider updating your handbook to be in compliance. Some of your organizations may have some issues because of your values with adding these things. Again, if you want to talk about any of that, I'm happy to have a conversation with you offline. Families First Response Act. Last year, there was a flurry of legal legislation passed. FFCRA was one. It did end as of the end of 2020. It's no longer required, but you can claim a Medicare tax credit if you voluntarily offer comparable leave. So if you are offering FFCRA type leave in 2020 and you continue to do it, you can claim a Medicare tax credit. And if you need any help with that, I know your SKC accountants are here to help. What I want you to consider, based on not this act, but based on what employees have gone through and their need for more flexibility, is review your time off and leave policies. First of all, you want to make sure you have those policies well defined. But in doing so, you may want to consider what flexibility you could possibly offer. Is there any way that you can increase the time off that people can take for take care of themselves, rest, relaxation, and consider possibly, can you allow them more rollover of time? A very important thing to put in your policy is require employees to stay home if they are ill. By now, we all know we can have employees work from home. Most employees can. Your policy should state, stay home if you are ill. Also, a recent change is that there's a tax credit for any employer that provides full pay for employees who take time off to get vaccinations. Again, won't get into the details on this, but if you need any assistance, just contact your accountant and they'll help you with that. Here's a trend, salary history ban. Again, KCMO in 2019 passed an ordinance that prohibits private employers with 6 or more employees from asking applicants about their salary history. So that's a KCMO thing, and you can read more details there. But on a national level, the U.S. House of Representatives passed the Paycheck Fairness Act earlier this year. And if that's signed into law, it would prohibit employers nationwide from asking applicants about their salary history, and it would require them to prove that pay disparities between men and women are job related. So I'm not sure where this stands, but one thing you may want to consider is you're using an application right now that has people list what their prior salary histories are. You may want to consider just removing that. It is a common practice to give somebody a new salary offer based on what they used to make versus what the going market rate is. And so I would encourage you to maybe take that off of your application now. Also related to employment application, another trend is ban the box. 14 states and 20 cities have already enacted ban the box policies. That means if you cannot ask job applicants about their criminal history before an offer of employment is made. And the aim of this, obviously, is to provide applicants who have a criminal history with a better chance at competing in the labor market. So this is another thing that you may want, if you've got that criminal question on your application, you may want to consider updating it now and removing that question. This might be the last thing. If I waited another month, there would be more headlines and more things to report, but you may have heard that one of Biden's initiative is to raise the minimum wage. Right now, it only applies to federal contractors. I would not be surprised. This is not going to go away, and I just want to make sure you're aware of it. I know that this would create quite a hardship on nonprofits and small businesses, so we will see what happens, but federal contractors right now are the only ones that have to comply. Finally, the Americans Family Plan has been proposed, and it would require employers to provide 12 weeks of paid family and medical leave. Currently, only employers who have 50 or more employees must offer FMLA, and FMLA is unpaid. This plan would provide 12 weeks of paid family and medical leave through a federally funded program. But again, at this point, employers under 50 have not had to provide 12 weeks of pay, and this would change that for all employers. Of course, this can continue to evolve before it gets finalized. Okay, that is the compliance stuff. How fun was that? Yeah, very good. So we're going to move on to our next poll, and then we're going to get into talking about employee engagement, your ideas for and practices you're putting into place. So if you would take a minute, actually a second, to respond to this poll, that would be great. How would you rate your employees' level of engagement compared to pre-pandemic levels? The most are saying it's the same. Interesting. Second, higher. Lower, and we don't know. So it's almost kind of a third. It's lower, we don't know. A third higher, and just a little bit more of the same. Good, thanks for participating. I'm glad to hear those results. So if this is our mini study, we would say only 15% of our employees are less engaged. So that's great. So let's talk about employee engagement before we get into our discussion. How we're doing. Okay, Quantum is an organization that administers the best places to work survey around the country. And their definition of employee engagement is the strength of the mental and emotional connection employees feel toward the work they do, their teams, and their organization. Engagement creates a sense of focus and increases involvement so that employees can perform their best, which is what you all need them to do. If you wanted to do a mini survey, the Quantum Best Places to Survey has a lot of questions, but Quantum has found that these questions are the top 10 drivers of engagement. And again, you're going to get this presentation so you can have these questions. You can do your own mini self-assessment or survey your employees. But these are the themes. Employees want motivating jobs, inspiring leaders and teams, and organizations built for success. And again, I want to get the discussion, so I'm going to move on. And we talked earlier about the reasons employees are leaving. These are the reasons employees stay. And again, this is just a little graph for you to consider. How do you think your employees would rate these things? So the top reason employees stay, 23%, it's because of work-life balance. The next one is recognition for their work. Employees want to feel heard, seen, valued, recognized for their contributions, especially with what many of them have gone through. And then the tie for third is comp and benefits and a great working relationship with the manager. So those are the reasons employees stay according to this plan or according to this survey. So we are going to get into this discussion now. We've got about 25 minutes. I hope that's going to be adequate. Jenny might give us a few minutes if you just want to go on and on with your ideas. At this time, would you please put your cameras on? There's some people who've already let us know they won't be doing that, but if you would put your cameras on so we can see you. The first question, and I'll repeat them as we go along, but the first question is how you expect your work environment to evolve in the next few months. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to turn it over to Jenny to talk about how Support Kansas City has been handling this interesting time and how they're evolving. Hi, everyone.
Really quickly, Sonja, there was a question in the chat about if there were demographics about who was surveyed for the last poll on why employees stay.
Oh,
she said different age groups. For instance, different age groups for leaving and staying vary. She was just curious. They were, I don't know, actually, sorry. They were just curious about the demographics on, if you had that.
Why don't you talk and I'll look it up.
What?
You were correct, it is she.
Okay, I was making an assumption. I didn't know who you were, so I apologize.
You're good, no worries.
I will go ahead and answer this first question, and I'm putting it in the chat for folks as well, and definitely interested in hearing what other people have to say on this. So pre-COVID, SKC had a policy of working remote 2 days a month with permission. And then obviously we went 100% remote. And so starting July 12th, we are moving into a new realm for us. And we have set up that staff are expected to be in the office 2 days a week. And then the other 3 days a week, they can work wherever they want. essentially. And we've really looked at our flex policy, our PTO policy, and how we have things set up so staff could technically go work in a cabin in Colorado for the month and use PTO and use their flex and those sorts of pieces. The reason that we're bringing people back in on set days is the connection piece and the ability to create better collaborations and build some of those relationships. What are other folks doing or thinking about doing?
Hi, I'm Cindy Johnston. I'm with American Public Square. And one of the things that happened for us during COVID is we downsized our office. So we're at Plex Pod, so we went to a smaller office, which means we cannot go back to the office because there's only room for 1 or 2 people. So what we've been doing is sort of alternating, like I will go in on Wednesdays and somebody else will maybe go in on Tuesdays, and then we utilize the conference rooms to do some more in-person like board meetings and committee meetings. But for us, and our staff has actually really grown since January and just continues to grow. But for us, that's kind of where we're going to be until that lease is up. And I think that's also what kind of has changed for some people. And I will say at Plex Pod, in January, there was not a soul to be found in the building. But as of yesterday, it feels like a great co-working space, and there are a lot of people coming back. So we could have people come and use other little offices, but yeah, we completely downsized.
One thing I want to jump in on really quick, because I do think that there are organizations that have downsized or even eliminated their spaces. Due to a whole lot of circumstances that I don't need to go into right now, SKC actually expanded because there were things in the work prior to COVID. But one of the things that we are able to offer some of our clients is actually meeting room space as we're moving forward. So for organizations that are become more decentralized, if there is a need, hey, we need to be able to conduct some in-person sorts of things, those are going to be some opportunities. Anybody else want to share what they're doing as they're moving forward?
Well, I can share. I'm relatively new. I just joined the Youth Volunteer Corps about 5 or 6 weeks ago. And when I first came, there's only been certain people in the office. So we've maintained our space. And everybody pretty much worked remote throughout COVID. What we're going to start July 1st is a hybrid model where people could propose if they wanted to be in the office certain days or working remote certain days. And then we just sort of pieced it all together. So there'll probably be, I don't know, 2 or 3 people in most every day. On Mondays, everybody's going to be in because we're going to have a group staff meeting and some meeting time. And we just want to have the culture piece and the get to know each other piece. But then on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, it'll just be a mix of, like I say, probably 2 or 3 in the office each of those days.
Good. So have any of you put in place new telework policies, agreements, anything like that?
Yeah, I can speak for, oh, I'm sorry. As I say, I can say that we've got a new little document, a little policy that talks about what the expectations are around how we're going to try to maintain culture, maintain relationships, make sure that the business, keeps doing everything that it needs to do. And we're actually signing those and agreeing to a schedule.
Good. Good. Anyone else doing anything around that?
Hi, I'm Susila Jones. I'm with Crosslines Community Outreach, and we need to do something like that. So we haven't yet, but we are in the unique, well, we're not unique, but almost everybody is in the office because we're frontline. And normally I'm in the office, but I'm modeling good self-care and I wasn't feeling well today, so I'm home. But for the most part, we are all in person. However, there's a few people who did work from home during the pandemic and have jobs that they can, but now we're struggling as they're coming back as kind of a hybrid model, making it feel equitable to the folks who can't work from home. So it's a struggle to allow people who can work from home that flexibility, but our kitchen can't run if the kitchen manager is working from home. Our case managers can't do their work from home as well. Some of it they can. So we're trying to find that balance of how do we promote flexibility, but also equity between jobs and, you know, responsibilities. So that's our struggle.
Yeah,
we need to solidify it, and we're in the works on that.
Yeah, that's a balancing act, and you're right about the folks who have to come in the office. Are there any ways that you can offer them flexibility? Oftentimes, no. They have to be there within certain hours. So it's tough to navigate. It is the nature, and one of the things you would have in your policy is we're happy to accommodate those whose jobs can be done remotely, and unfortunately not all can.
Yeah, I think we'll just have it in each individual job description. Like, this job is 100% in person. This job has a percentage of flexibility, and just have it outlined in each description. Yeah.
What's unfortunate is, again, now that a lot of people have had this taste of working from home, and not, including myself, not having to get up, get dressed, drive, you know, they like it. And those employees where you're not able to provide the flexibility, you are at risk for losing them. So, okay. And we knew a dog was going to bark, didn't we? It was mine. Okay, let's anyone else on just how you're handling the work environment or the working model? Otherwise, we'll move on to the next question, which is, what steps have you taken, or do you plan to take to be more intentional about engaging your employees and retaining them?
I'll speak again. We implemented some pay increases for we kind of did an evaluation, and some of our jobs needed pay increases. So we were very intentional to make sure that certain positions got that increase. And we're also trying to be super intentional with making sure staff is getting the trainings that they want and need to stay engaged that way. So not that we still don't have a lot of areas to work on, but those have kind of been ways to make sure that they stay engaged and stay learning and feeling like they're getting the education they need.
That's great, because, you know, most people want growth. And if you're a small organization, you don't have promotional opportunities, but people, they feel valued when you invest that time in their development. So that's great. Who else wants to share?
I can share. We have really revisited, like I said, kind of what our flex procedures were, so that staff feel that they can, if the work permits, be able to go out to their kids' ball game, but maybe make the hours up in the evening, that you don't have to be chained to whatever your workspace is between the hours of 8 and 5, that your life, the work part of your life, can revolve better around the other commitments that you have in it, while still meeting the needs and expectations of the organization.
I think also for us, being that we can't really office together because our office is so small and so many of us are new and don't really know each other yet, is that we really are having to and want to go out of our way to do some type of team lunches. We brought Thelma's in and did a team lunch, or we've got things that we feel like we need to continue to plan so that we sort of get that time together to get to know each other and be cohesive and still feel like we're, you know, we work with a really great group of people, because that's one of the things you miss about just everyone working out of their house. So we are trying to be intentional as to what does that look like. And that takes money, do you know what I mean, to plan team events. So you need to put that in the budget. But I think that's going to be really important for our staff throughout the rest of this year and throughout the rest of the lease that we have in this space, is to be intentional about team ideas.
Yep, it's definitely one of the things that gets lost when you don't run into each other in the hallway and water cooler and whatnot. but organizations have gotten really creative. I was consulting with one last fall who they had literally, they called it water cooler conversation, and everybody would come in to a Zoom or Teams meeting at 3 o'clock on Wednesday afternoons. And they did a lot of fun things about, you know, came up with a fun question for everybody to answer. What's your favorite food, or, you know, movie, or something silly like that, but just to help, you know, get to know each other and feel as though, well, also have a little bit of fun. You know, we weren't having too much fun last year. Have any of you used stay interviews? No? I'm gonna, when we send out the presentation, I will include some sample stay interviews. As an HR person, I've done tons and tons of exit interviews, but at that point it's too late. So stay interviews are a really good way for you to check in with your employees and get to those questions that I covered in the presentation about why employees stay. Let's find out what it is that they need, want, how we can fulfill those needs before they move on. So I'll include that when we send out the presentation. Anything else folks are doing to get their employees engaged, inspired, be their best? You don't want to brag? Silence is good. I'm going to wait another few seconds. Okay. All right. The next one is somewhat related, but you know, we talked about burnout, mental health concerns, the number of and percentage of people who started having issues with depression, anxiety went up tremendously last year. And, you know, this presentation isn't really that unique to nonprofits, except for the fact I think you all experienced even more pressure to maintain your mission, keep the funding up, keep your employees going during this tough time. So what support are you offering to employees to address their burnout, their mental health concerns?
I'll go this time.
Thank you, Jamie.
Jamie with Girls on the Run of Kansas City. And Lindsay, I do want to wave at you because we email all the time and I don't think I've ever seen your face, so.
Yay!
Yeah, it's nice to see your face.
But we, one of the big things that we're doing this year is the burnout piece for us has been really big because we've had to like reimagine almost all of our programming. So we're actually closing our office from July 1st through the 12th. So Lindsay, I'll be offline for those 12 days. But that's going to be really great. Like people are like told not to take their laptops with them when they go someplace. And we're also all being encouraged to take, July is a good month for us to take vacation, to take more days in July if we need or want them before we gear back up for our fall programming.
Good. Yeah, time away and truly totally disconnected is critical. Plus a little meditation, yoga, talking to people who can support you is helpful. What are other folks doing? Do any of you offer an employee assistance program, or have you offered any other resources to your folks? I take that as a no.
No, but I would love if anybody knows of any good EAP options for smaller nonprofits. That would be huge information. Okay. I would find very helpful.
Okay. And I have an idea, but I will follow up on that. Yeah, EAPs are traditionally a pretty inexpensive benefit to offer for the value that they bring. and I've worked with one in particularly here in Kansas City that I think is really a good fit for nonprofits and small businesses. So I'll follow up with you on that. Again, it does not cost much, and the value and the message it gives to your employees about how much we do care about you. The other thing, you know, from a mental health and to your point about being a role model, I think it's important for leaders to be vulnerable. You know, in the past, we've been very reluctant to talk about anything related to mental health. You don't want to get into any sort of ADA, you know, accommodation issues by opening up that can of worms. On the other hand, I think it's critical that we are more open and more accepting of these issues, and that leaders can be a role model. If you're struggling with something, be open and honest about, yeah, this is challenging for me too, and be willing to show that it's okay to show emotion and that we need help. So finally, what efforts are any of you taking to improve diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? And thanks for popping that up, Jenny. This is obviously a really important area during this last year of all of the concerns with social injustice and so forth. And I know it's important to all of you. What are any of you doing to make changes in that area?
I can speak briefly on that. We've really looked at our hiring processes and where we're posting jobs, and have worked really hard at increasing the percent of diverse candidates in our pool. And posting, we traditionally posted in one place, so we got the same thing basically, and that's what we reflect in our organization. And now we're posting in multiple locations, and really have done a lot of experimenting about how those posts are and what they're bringing in related to candidates, and have increased the diversity of actually our hires that we've already made this year. And then in addition, we're doing intentional equity and inclusion training with our team that we have not done previously. And then on the other side of that, our board has looked very critically at its makeup and how we can recruit voices, the other voices that we need within our organization.
Thank you, Jenny. Who else has something to share?
I would say that we kind of mirror exactly what Jenny just said in our organization. In addition to that, we have been doing either monthly common reads as a staff or podcasts or things like that to help us start to have conversations around equity and inclusion and diversity. So that's been really great for us.
Good. Anyone else? No, that's okay. You know, having an inclusive work environment is, you know, where all folks of all kinds feel welcome. You just really, if you've got the kind of culture that is welcoming, supportive, everyone feels seen, heard, and valued, you know, this, there's hope. And if you need any, you know, ideas, Jenny can share them with us about how she's getting better results posting, because I know that's challenging to attract. Once you have a more diverse makeup of your work group, then the most important thing is to keep everyone inspired, engaged. The more employees enjoy working there, the better chance you have of getting referrals and networking, and those are the best kind of hires to get. So we are at the end of our time. Are there any other things that you'd like to share off any of the questions or other questions you have for this group that you might want to pose?
Okay. Well, I want to thank you, Sonja. I learned a lot from you, and I actually learned several things from this discussion. And so I appreciate everybody being a part of this today and sharing things that you're doing as you're moving forward so that we can all learn from each other. We will be flashing 2 quick, easy questions up on the screen to give us feedback about today's session as we're moving forward so that we can continue to build and grow our coffee cup conversations. If you have an idea for a future coffee cup topic, definitely enter that into the chat. We're always looking for new ideas. Our next session will be on Thursday, July 15th at 2 p.m. and it will be about kind of 401k options that nonprofits, small businesses can offer to their employees and teams. And that will be again at 2 o'clock, and information will be coming out about that. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of their Thursday. You'll take a moment to complete our polling questions, and hopefully we will see you all on the 15th.